I'm Tanisha Gupta. I head up marketing at Distimo. We're an app analytics company. Sorry, it's going to be a little hard for some of you to see some of the numbers on there, but we'll put up we'll share the presentation out and we'll put it up on SlideShare so then everyone can kind of have access to it. Okay? So let's get started. Basically, have you ever wondered, what country has the most lucrative app market right now? What % of global revenue these different markets are generating? What business models are driving success in most countries in terms of revenue? Well, these are just some of the data points that I'll be sharing with you today, and hopefully by the time this presentation is done, you'll be able to answer all these questions and actually have even more insight into the global app economy. Before we get started, I just want to give you a few words on Distimo, what we do, and how we're able to have access to all these global trends. So, Distimo is a global leader in business intelligence and app market data. We provide download and revenue estimates for any app that's ranked globally. Our premium product, AppIQ, is what's fueling most of these global data trends, and all the data I share in this presentation with you is fueled by AppIQ. We also offer a free analytics dashboard for developers to track their own market data, their own downloads and revenue, and free conversion tracking. And then of course we have an API, so you can integrate your data into any third-party platform. With that, let's get started. So we'll start out by taking a global look at the app economy, then we'll talk about market growth and see what continents and what countries are really growing right now. Then we'll discuss business models and see what type of business models are really driving success. And then we'll discuss Appstore categories. And lastly, I'll share a little bit of insights about Amazon because it's really a growing app store. So let's start by taking a look at the global app industry. Here, we're looking at the top 10 countries that are generating revenue on Apple App Store and Google Play combined. As you can see here, the United States is still the largest market for revenue, but Japan is really close behind, followed by South Korea. Again, this is Apple App Store and Google Play revenue combined. So let me share some interesting data points on each unique app store. On iOS, revenue from iPhone and iPad was largest in US, Japan, and then China. And for Google Play, it was Japan, US, and South Korea. One interesting thing about Google Play is that the country that's driving the 4th largest revenue is Germany. And in the next slide, you'll start to see why that's interesting. So in this slide, we're taking a look at revenue distribution between iOS and Google Play in various countries. We've broken it down between iPad and iPhone just to give you a clearer view of each market. So blue is Google Play, you've got iPhone in orange, and the red is iPad. So as you can see, iOS is really dominating in the West. Basically, and Google Play has a huge chunk of the Asian market, South Korea and Japan. The reason that I had mentioned Germany was interesting is if you look over at Germany, usually the European markets tend to emulate North America, but Germany is actually emulating Asia when it comes to its revenue behavior, in that Google Play has a really large chunk of the revenue share there. So that's really pretty interesting for developers that want to localize into the German market or want to develop for the German market. So next we'll actually on this slide, we're taking a look at revenue generation by continent. And here, you can see that Asia is the most lucrative app market in the world. Asia is leading revenue generation by 43% of global revenue. North America is in second place with 31%, and Europe is in third place with 21%. So now that we've seen the revenue generating capacity that Asia has to offer, let's key in and look at what revenue growth within Asia actually looks like. Revenue in Asia has been growing at a really, really fast pace. As you can see here, it's expanded in 2013 by 162%. And this growth is largely contributed by Google Play, which we already saw in the previous slides, how Google Play has such a large market share in Asia. Google Play quadrupled in 2013 within Asia. The Apple App Store revenue for iPhone also close to doubled at 94%, and iPad revenue grew by 64%. So you can see that all markets within Asia are growing, but Google Play is growing at the fastest rate. So this should give you an example of the revenue potential within Asia and how robust and growing that market is. In this slide, we're taking a look at total revenue growth. So in the next slide, let's key in and look at the countries that are contributing and driving this growth within Asia. Here, we're taking a look at the top 6 countries in Asia and the revenue split by different platforms. Again, we've split iPhone and iPad just to give a clearer view of each market. So one interesting thing to note in this slide is that the majority of the revenue in Asia is being driven by a handful of countries. And the most lucrative of them is Japan, followed by South Korea. So now that we've taken a look at revenue growth in Asia, let's start to look at market growth in the industry as a whole. So at this point, this slide shouldn't really come as a surprise to anyone. In this slide, we're looking at Apple and Google Play market growth for 2013. We've already discussed how Asia is growing and how robust it is. So you can see here that markets like South Korea, China, and Japan, and Russia are really the ones that are experiencing a lot of growth right now. And markets that are more to the left over there have kind of established themselves. Though for all of us working in mobile, a really great fact is that regardless of the degree of growth, all markets in 2013 saw positive impact and positive growth in terms of revenue. And I think that's only going to continue in 2014. On this slide, we're looking at Apple versus Google Pay revenue development. So both revenues grew over the past year, over 2013. Google Pay revenue grew by around 45% though, whereas Apple revenue grew by 26%. And basically the main key takeaway is that both of the major app stores are seeing really positive growth, but Google Play is growing at a much faster pace. At least that's the trend we saw in 2013, and it'll be interesting to see the rate at which Google Play continues to grow in 2014. So now that we have a better understanding of the different markets and their growth on both Apple App Store and Google Play, let's take a look at the various business models that are driving this growth. And again, I apologize, I know it's a little hard to see here. But in this chart, we're basically looking at revenue from apps in the top 200 grossing. And you can see that the freemium business model, which is basically a free app with in-app purchase transactions in it, is seeing growth on both these platforms here. In fact, in 2013, in-app purchases increased up to 92% on Apple. And on Google Play, it was even more aggressive. They grew by 98%. So we can see that freemium as a model continues to grow pretty much in popularity across both platforms. But for me, this begs the question, is this the case in every category? So let's take a look at that. First, let's take a look at the markets and see if freemium is really the business model of choice in every market. So here we're going to take a look at Japan and the United States, which are the two most lucrative markets right now. And here you can see that while freemium is pretty strong within the United States, at least paid apps have some small part of the pie to be had. But within Japan, this lean towards freemium is even more aggressive. So this is just Japan. I want to kind of show the business model preferences within Asia as a whole. So let's take a look at that in the next slide. We've already seen with Japan that it has much more of a preference towards the free model with in-app purchases. This seems to be more or less a tendency for most of Asia. China is leading the way for this, with apps generating 96% of their revenue from in-app purchases. Japan and South Korea are a close second, with 91% of their revenue coming from a free app that drives its revenue through in-app purchases. So it seems that the overall industry preference is towards freemium, but let's take a look at different categories next and see if there are categories in which the paid model is still able to monetize. Here we're looking at the top 10 categories based on revenue. So you can see here that games and social are primarily generating net revenue from the free model. Games is the top one and social is right below it. And another category that leans even stronger towards freemium is newsstand, which is the third one from the top. You can see that it's predominantly purple, which is showing the freemium distribution. And that makes sense because categories like newsstand are usually based off of a subscription model. On the other hand, categories like productivity, navigation, and education are still showing that they're able to monetize within a paid model. So regardless of this general trend towards freemium, if you're developing for those categories, then having a paid app might actually make sense. So from here, let's take a look at different categories on the Apple App Store and on Google Play. In this slide, we're looking at the top categories by download and device installs for Apple and Google Play respectively. So let's start by looking at some of the commonalities in the category performances for the two app stores. Games, without doubt, are the most popular app category on both platforms. And entertainment, and I believe social, made it to the top of both as well. But if you look over at Apple, you see that after games and entertainment, photos and video comes in third place. However, when you look over to Google Play and you try to find the photos category, you don't see it there in the top. And that's because for some reason on Google Play, the photos and video category actually performs quite poorly, below 5% in device installs. Other categories that are below 5% on Google Play are productivity and music and audio. Categories that are below the 5% mark on Apple are music, education, and productivity. So we see that categories that really aren't performing well on either platform are productivity. On Apple, just for the games category though, let's take a look, since it's so popular, of the split between iPhone and iPad. So 51% of downloads within games are on iPad and 36% on iPhone. From here, let's dig a little deeper into each category and look at the revenue trends. We'll start with Apple. And this is again for February 2014, so it's not a prolonged time frame. But here you can see that the growth for the category of Apple, pretty much most categories saw a decline. And there's very much only a handful of categories that saw a boost in revenue, being finance and sports mainly. So let's take a look at Google and then we'll kind of talk about the similarities that both Apple and Google are showing in terms of revenue categories in February. So again, you can see here it's similar to Apple. Most categories are seeing kind of a drop in popularity and a drop in revenue. But the categories that are doing well are sports and finance. In fact, finance saw a pretty healthy growth on both categories. It generated 42% on the Apple App Store in February, and on Google Play, it was as much as 71%. So one of the main reasons that we see finance did so well in February is, of course, tax season. Another category that we see doing really well on both platforms is sports. And we'll discuss in a second why sports also did so well. The main reason being the Winter Olympics. Here you can see how different countries contributed to the growth of the sports category. Basically, in our data that we saw that apps that let users see how their country was performing for the Olympics really drove a lot of downloads into the sports category. The Sochi 2014 results app was the most popular one within the sports category, just really driving downloads and success of that category. So next, I want to share a few interesting things about the Amazon App Store, just because Amazon is a pretty emerging, influential app store in the app ecosystem, and it's well on its way to being a contender for possibly the third largest app store. So here are some interesting details about the Amazon App Store. The top 200 free apps had a total of 15 million downloads in March on Amazon. So there's quite a bit of download capacity in that store. The most downloaded apps were games, which is very similar to Apple and Google Play again. In February, games led with an impressive 61% downloads for Amazon. Though just to give you a comparative idea, in terms of downloads, for free apps, Google Play is approximately 14 times larger than the Amazon App Store, and for paid apps, Google Play is 2 times larger. Here is just a screenshot of the top 10 apps on the Amazon App Store as of yesterday, the top 10 ranked. So you can see here that most of these apps are games. You've got 2 exceptions. You've got a YouTube viewer app and Facebook. And if I expanded this list to the top 20, the trend is pretty much the same. The only kind of other contenders that join in are like Pandora and a couple other big names like that. But for the majority, it looks just like this, with games being the top 20, the top 25 on Amazon. So with this, I'm just going to do a quick review of just the presentation. Basically, Asia is the leading in app revenue. Google Play is seeing a lot of growth within Asia. Most of the revenue growth in Asia is being driven by a handful of countries. Germany, within the Western market, is a bit of an anomaly because it's showing the same kind of lean in terms of revenue on Google Play that Asia has, whereas the rest of the Western market is emulating North America, with Apple being the leader. All markets in 2013 showed positive revenue growth, and then freemium seems to be the business model of choice more and more globally, with the exception of some categories, like productivity and navigation. And lastly, Amazon is emerging as an influential app store for developers. So this, I'm pretty much wrapping up, but if you found the kind of data I shared with you valuable, we have a lot of free resources for developers. App Trends is our web-based service that lets you search ranking data for any app and global trends for any app. We also do monthly publications, and we just published one yesterday actually on the impact a feature can have on your app. So if you're interested in that, just find me afterwards and I'll tell you how you can download it for free. And then we offer free leaderboards and then also a blog that's pretty active. So these are just free sources for you to get data and keep up with what's going on with the global app economy. So thank you. Yeah, at this point I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Are you going to email this out or how will we?
Yeah, if you want access to this, we'll send this out and then I'll put this on SlideShare as well. So on Distimo's SlideShare account, you can all have access to it there.
How do you get the data?
So all this data is generated from our premium product, AppIQ, and what we're doing with AppIQ is basically aggregating its global estimates, and I can explain our methodology to you just offline. I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. Any other questions?
Are there any other
So we do track Windows. In terms of our premium product, we focus on some of the more major app stores, basically iOS, Google Play. But one other trend that I didn't really talk much about here is more and more Western apps trying to break into Asian markets and just what they're doing to find success there. And localization, and more than localization, culturalization is playing a huge part in it. And I'll be happy to share some examples and stuff with you in a minute. I'll be around afterwards. Yes?
Do you have any data that sort of tracks which of the apps are standalone